Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Festival in the memory of Balabhadra Bhattacarya Das Brahmachari, who passed away a few days ago. How many of you knew Balabhadra, who we're talking about? If you ever met him, you would never forget it. Unique personality who passed away a few days ago in a road accident. He was traveling by motorbike, which isn't very much recommended. It's very dangerous to travel by motorbike. He was hit by a truck. He was traveling between Bangalore and Hyderabad in South India. He was in charge of the Sankirtan party, taking it from Hyderabad to Bangalore. He was coming back alone, and he was hit by a truck and instantly passed away. So this morning I'd like to speak about him and his devotional service. First saw him, I think it must have been 94. Actually, it was the second time I came to Russia, but it was the first time since 1985. The first time of my regular visit. So I visited his hometown of Yaroslavl, and at that time the ISKCON center was in an abandoned building. So we were having kirtans there. He was very big, and Bhakti Yevgeny, I think. He was very big and tall. So he was jumping very enthusiastically and almost up to the ceiling. And the whole building was shaking so much. It was a really dilapidated building. Yes. The whole building was shaking so much that we were saying, well, maybe we should dance less enthusiastically. So that was a very prominent trait. He was very enthusiastic. Later he came to be initiated by me, and he came to India and like to do book distribution. He was always very enthusiastic for distributing Prabhupada's books. And in India, from the beginning, he was like a leader. He had some leadership quality. And it was understood. Balabhadra means book distribution. He was always either distributing books or arranging for others to distribute books or thinking how to distribute more books. And pretty much every day he was out distributing books. He spent a few years in Gujarat, and for some time he was we had a local padayatra there for some time. So he was going in villages and distributing many books. Then some more devotees were coming, and they were thinking more, you want to get a vehicle and travel more widely. So there were different plans to get vehicles, and eventually got one vehicle, but then he managed to get some old second-hand vehicle. He was traveling around in that. Then he got some bigger van, but that wasn't very good. And then just last year he had to come back to Russia to get a new passport and visa. And we spent a few months distributing books here. He told me how he would distribute. I think it's a common technique here among the book distributors. And he would dress up in a suit and go to see the big businessmen, especially people who run bars and casinos and so many things where there's some illegal things going on. And I can't remember exactly, he had some identification card which made him look like he was in the police.
Yeah, it looks like, outwardly it looks like a police, because it's red and has this sign of the Russian country. What do you call it? Kind of stamp?
ID card or something?
No, the symbol of the country. Insignia, the country. Eagle. So it looks like a policeman. Right. But inside it was like a member of some preaching organization. So he was just taking this out, and the very sight of it produced.
Yeah,
sure. No, you can. I'll translate the whole thing.
Yeah. So they become very afraid and think that now they have to pay some big fine or bribe. By showing this, he could get right in and see all the top people. But then he would introduce, they were really afraid, and then he'd introduce it. Actually, we just want to show you these books, and then they understood that they completely relieved. When they realized they just had to buy a set of books which didn't cost very much compared to what they thought they'd have to pay. And then, okay, fine, no problem. It sells so many books. Whole sets of books. A little unorthodox, but anyway, the books got distributed. Then In India also, he was very expert at getting to see all different top people. He'd go in the office of some big company or government department, and somehow or other he'd get in and see the top person first of all. He would go right in, and the guards and everything, he just would ignore them. Seeing as he was far bigger than the average Indian person, there wasn't much they could say or do to stop him. But he was very good at dealing with these top people, and they'd be happy to see him. He'd mostly sell their little sets of books, and then you'd go around all the office and sell so many people. He was also very interested to study the books. He was carefully studying the philosophy. He was very intelligent, actually. Although he was he might seem like somewhat passionate the way he was going out and distributing books, he was also very philosophical. Although he didn't speak any English at all when I first met him. Within a short time of coming to India, he was speaking fluent. I mean, a certain style of English, but he could understand everything and communicate everything. This means grammatically not very perfect, but everything was understood. Generally, he would read books in English, and he was all the time, because there's Russian devotees in India everywhere, so he would all the time be translating the lectures. I think probably more than any other disciple, I chastised him more than anyone. He had a lot of energy, and sometimes it burst out in different directions. So I had to put it back in the right direction. Something like a racing horse. A lot of energy, but you have to really keep it under control. Otherwise, they'll ride all over the place. So I would chastise him. One reason I knew that he would take the chastisement, because he was actually very, even though he was a little wild-natured sometimes, he was actually very dedicated to me and respected me myself. And although, like I was saying, like a racing horse, he was sometimes a little difficult to handle, but his intentions were always very pure.
He was very respectful?
Yeah, that was before.
No, after you said that he was like a racing horse then?
Yeah, I said that even though he was sometimes a little difficult to control, maybe like a racing horse, for example, but his intentions were very pure. His intentions were, he was only thinking how to serve and how to preach, especially how to distribute Prabhupada's books. And he was, I say, he's a little wild and this and that, but I mean in his basic practice of Krishna consciousness, sadhana was very good. He would be up every morning, early in the morning, the chant his rounds, attend class. And then all day he would work very hard. It's not so easy to go out in the heat in India in the day after day, going out and a bag of books. Like I was saying, he was a natural leader type. That he wanted to take charge, engage more people in book distribution. He was experiencing some difficulty in leading. Like I said, he had a lot of energy and it's difficult for most of the devotees to keep up with him. But he was doing well. Like I say, he was a little strong-headed, but I could see he was gradually becoming much more mature and level-headed. So I was thinking in future he'll do so many services. I was thinking actually how he'll develop in future, because he's actually having a lot of physical problems with his back because of carrying so many books all the time. So I was thinking for the years ahead then what other services he can do. He was looking actually for someone to help him with cultivating, because he met so many interested people in very top positions.
He was looking for someone to help him.
He was looking for someone to cultivate the people he was meeting.
To help him cultivate.
Yeah, so we're expecting him to do so many things, but Krishna had another plan inconceivable. Or Krishna, through his energy, Maya, arranged such a... Oh, there's some other points I should have mentioned. He very much liked to do kirtan. Apart from temple kirtans, he was sometimes like to sit down and just chant with other devotees. Apart from regular scheduled kirtan. So actually it's a great loss for the Sankirtan movement. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Anusharang Sahasreshu Kaschid Yatati Siddhi Tatam I
don't remember.
Krishna says out of thousands of people, hardly one is interested in searching for the truth. And of those who have attained the truth, hardly one knows me. So not so many people take up Krishna consciousness very seriously. And out of those who do, not that many take up preaching very seriously. And even if they take up the preaching seriously, then most they have so many family and other responsibilities. So he was exceptional in that regard. He was acting on the platform of pure devotional service, of surrender to Krishna. All his activities were simply focused on how to serve Guru and Krishna within the Sankirtan movement. So, like I say, it's a very great loss. We don't know why. Just a few months previously to this, Krishna Maharaj also left this world in a road accident. So then one disciple of mine wrote that in the last year he knew 9 devotees who had left the world in road accidents. So there are some lessons to be learned from this also. One thing is to drive carefully. These vehicles are very dangerous actually, because we're used to go in these vehicles and we take it as normal, but actually it's extremely dangerous. Any slight inattention can cost us nothing. And even if one is attentive, then still it's very dangerous. The devotee Bhattacarya was telling that in Los Angeles, when Mataji devotee, she was driving, she was stopped at the stoplight. But so the light turned green and then she proceeded, not fast, but just at a normal speed. But someone came the other way, they ignored the stoplight and came and rammed right into her and killed her. So it's very dangerous, we should remember. We say that the preachers take risks. So that's true in various ways. Preachers take risks in as much as they go among non-devotees, people who are not interested in Krishna. They may even be offensive towards the devotees or misbehave in various ways. Or even if they're friendly, they may be just very materialistic. When we go out preaching, then we go among materialistic atmosphere. So it is a risk to our own Krishna consciousness. It may be physically a risk also. Especially like this book distribution, we go door to door, you can meet some people there. I don't know if it happens in Russia very much, but I guess it can happen anywhere, that people may just physically assault them. Maybe not in Asia so much, because there's still the culture of respecting them. In Western Europe and America, it's quite possible. And there's also the risks that you take that actually if you want to preach very seriously and very straightforwardly, in many countries, at some point you're going to have to break someone's law. So they'll say, don't distribute books outside this shop or something. Even for chanting Hare Krishna, you can sometimes get arrested. When I was a new devotee, I was arrested almost every day. Or even if I wasn't arrested, I used to go to the court for other people, pretend to be them, just to save their time.
And pretend?
Yeah, I'd pretend to be them, because they'd be arrested for book distribution. So I would go in their place. I would go in their place and pay the £5 fine, and then they would go out. So there are various risks that preachers take. And one of them is traveling itself. That's also a risk, especially in the modern age, like I say, traveling in trains and planes and cars. So please be very careful, especially going by car. Because many of I see in Russia now, the roads they're very, very dangerous. There's too much traffic. Many times the driver, they'll cut out, they'll overtake with another vehicle coming the other way. They'll take very great risks. So please be careful. We all want you to go back to Godhead. Not so quick, because we have service to do also. We all have service to do in the Sankirtan movement. One thing we can learn from Balabhadra Bhattacharya's life is this dedication to preaching Krishna consciousness. Nowadays, we hear a lot of talk about how devotees, they like to talk about gopis and Raslila and so many things. But in almost all cases, it's quite artificial. Because those who are talking, they're not really fixed in Krishna consciousness at all. They don't really understand what they're talking about at all. We see that Prabhupada was a very practical acharya. Acharya means he should be practical, because he has to teach people how to practice Krishna consciousness. There's one story I'll tell you. Prabhupada was on one morning walk, And one devotee kept on asking questions about our position in the spiritual world and our relationship with the gopis and so on and so on.
About questions about
our position in the spiritual world, our relationship with gopis, pastimes with Christians. And Prabhupada, he didn't answer these questions. And he seemed to be a little annoyed actually that even this person was asking these questions. So one of the devotees, Shravas, he's now for many years now, he's been town president in Los Angeles. So he'd never said anything to Prabhupada in his life before because Prabhupada had so many disciples. And he thought that I want to say something to Prabhupada, at least once in my life. So he wanted to say something that would please Srila Prabhupada. So he suddenly spoke up and said, Prabhupada, I'm one of your book distributors, and we're going to the airport and distributing your books every day. And we try to distribute at least 100 books every day. We're not successful, but we're trying to do that. Usually we distribute about 80 books a day. Prabhupada stopped and looked at him, and a big smile came on Prabhupada's face. Prabhupada said, yes, this is a real disciple. He is simply interested how to serve and please the spiritual ones. So by that, Prabhupada was showing that what is the difference between someone who's thinking, I want to be a gopi, I will enjoy with Krishna, and someone who's simply thinking how to serve the spiritual master. So Balabhadra Bhattacarya, he had understood this. He was absorbed in how to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books and how to please Srila Prabhupada. So he was very much focused on this, all the time thinking like this. How to personally he was personally distributing books, organizing others to do so. He was thinking how to bring more men to distribute books. But all of a sudden, it's always unexpected. Sometimes these things are very difficult to understand. Why? Because we know that nothing can happen ultimately without Krishna's sanction. And particularly we understand that devotees who have taken to devotional service, they're under the protection of the internal energy. And especially those who take all risks to preach, then Prabhupada explained that Krishna, he takes special care of them. Prabhupada gave the example, just like of a country that is at war, that naturally the government, they're concerned with all the citizens. Naturally the government is concerned with all the citizens.
It means... it can be translated in this or that way, depends upon the sense. Concerned means what?
That they look after. But especially the government is interested to see that those on the front line, they are looked after, that they have enough food and clothing, because they're taking more risks, and their role is very crucial. If the men on the front line don't function properly, then everyone else can function properly, but you'll lose the war. So why exactly Krishna would take him away like this? We don't know. Krishna knows. But one thing is for sure, that he is under the protection of Krishna, and his destination is going to be a very auspicious one. If he remembered Krishna at the time of death, then he must have gone directly to Krishna. If not, then he will get a good birth and an opportunity to again continue in Krishna consciousness. This is exactly what Prabhupada said when his dear disciple Jayananda passed away. So in one sense there is nothing to lament. We know that Najayate Mriyate Vakada Chinnayam Bhutva Bhavita Vana Bhuya Ajo Nityam Shashvata Yang Purana Hanyate Hanyamane Shri. We know that for the soul there is never birth nor death. He does not come into being, nor does he ever cease to exist. He is unborn, eternal. These are the qualities of the soul. The soul is not killed when the body is killed. So there's nothing to lament for the passing of the body. But we also feel unhappy because we are deprived of the association of devotees. We should also, in seeing this, understand, to help us to remember that we're not going to stay here forever. We should all try to do something to satisfy Krishna before we leave this body. If any of us can distribute as many books as Balabhadra did during his about 8 years he was doing book distribution. If any of us could do throughout our lives as much as he did in those 8 years, then that would be a very great credit for us. He definitely got many blessings from Srila Prabhupada. He said that with every book you distribute, you make some advancement in Krishna consciousness. Of course, everyone has different ways everyone's serving Krishna differently. Not everyone's going to be a full-time book distributor. But everyone should try to do something in this regard, because Prabhupada, he emphasizes so much. Sometimes we say that in ISKCON, book distribution is a family business. Actually, you don't know what family business is, because if you come from communist culture.
Yeah.
But in the West now also, it's all multinational corporations, but traditionally they used to be family businesses. Something maybe on a small scale, like a shop or a timber works or something like that. And generation after generation, they would be in the family, the same business. Sometimes we say that in ISKCON, book distribution, it's a family business. Because Bhaktivinoda Thakur was, first of all, he took up this printing and publishing of books. He sent copies of his book, The Life and Teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to universities in the Western world. And he started the Sajjana Toshani magazine. And he taught his son, Siddhanta Saraswati, how to edit, proofread, and also how to work the printing machine. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was so expert, even if something went wrong with the machine, he knew how to fix it himself. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati coined this term, the Brihat Mridanga, Brihan Mridanga. We all know the example that this small Mridanga that can be heard in a limited area, but books, they go everywhere. So the Mridanga that was made very big by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was made colossally huge by Srila Prabhupada. And that idea that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati gave that idea he gave was expanded literally millions of times by Bhaktivedanta Swami. Prabhupada had literally millions of books published in English and in other languages and distributed all over the world. And he emphasized very strongly that he wanted his disciples to continue distributing these books. So this is our family business. Even going back in history, we see that Vyasadeva, he was writing. And then the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, they wrote so many books. Nana Shastra Vicharanayaka Nipano Sadharma Samsthapaka Lokana Sharanyaka. 6 Goswamis, they were very expert in scrutinizing and studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all mankind. Thus, they are honored by everyone for their wonderful contribution. So the 6 Goswamis, they were writing books, and then in the next generation, Jiva Goswami, he sent out Shyamananda Srinivasa Narotam, go and take these books and distribute this knowledge. And subsequently, of course, the 6 Goswamis wrote so many important books. And then in our Sampradaya also, so many Acharyas, they wrote so many important books. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Baladev Vidyabhushan, they gave so much important literary contribution. And again, later on, Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wrote so many important books and other writings. Prabhupada, he distilled the essence of all the instructions of the previous acharyas and put them in his Prabhupada. Prabhupada said that by reading my books, you get in contact with the previous acharyas. So this is our family business to distribute these books to others. So as much as possible, all of us should try to do this. Whatever else we're doing in Krishna consciousness, we should always think how to distribute Prabhupada's books. Some of you, we have some brahmacharis here who they're doing that, dedicated themselves. There are 2 distributing books in Moscow here, and Radha's distributing books in South India, a separate party. And Gurunaram is also translating and publishing and helping to distribute my books, which is continuing the family tradition. Of course, Prabhupada's books, they are the law books for the next 10,000 years, as Prabhupada said. Prabhupada also wanted his disciples to write books. Of course, not with the idea to replace Prabhupada's books, no such idea, but to illuminate points that Prabhupada has made. Prabhupada said that my disciples will write commentaries on my purport. So that is the natural function of any preacher. He will write. That is kirtan. That will go on. Prabhupada said that my purports are my devotional ecstasy. Sometimes we think, well, we should expect some advanced devotees to show some signs of ecstasy. They should cry and become stunned or something. Prabhupada did sometimes, but he would hide such symptoms. Unlike the Sahajiyas who they advertise, they show some false signs of ecstasy and advertise. They want to show everyone, see what an advanced devotee I am. Prabhupada said, my purports are my devotion ecstasy. Because in his purport, Prabhupada glorified Krishna. This is his service to Krishna. Actually, we're not interested in ecstasy, we're interested in service. Ecstasy, that is a sign, that is a byproduct. But if a devotee doesn't think how I will enjoy ecstasy, he thinks how I will serve Krishna. Just like that's described in the Nectar of Devotion, for example. Daruka, who happens to be the chariot driver of Krishna. So one time he was fanning Krishna. But while he was doing so, he became stunned in ecstasy. Then he realized, I've become stunned and now I can't fan Krishna because of this ecstasy. I don't want this ecstasy, I want to fan Krishna. My service is being impeded. What is the use of this so-called ecstasy? So Prabhupada expressed his ecstasy by his Tivra Bhakti, fully focused how to serve Krishna by spreading the Sankirtan movement. That the force of his bhakti for Krishna, instead of being expressed in some external display, was expressed by his day and night, day after day, writing his books, preaching Krishna consciousness, spreading the Sankirtan. And he wanted his disciples to inherit that mood or imbibe that mood. So we can confidently say that Balabhadra Bhattacarya Prabhu, he had imbibed that mood of Tivra Bhakti, or very concentrated, powerful devotion. So he was very focused on pushing on the Sankirtan movement by distributing Prabhupada's books. Of course, he was, everyone has some various struggles with the mind. But he didn't become overwhelmed by that. He went on with his service. That is the sign of someone who's pure devotee. He's pure in the sense that his very clear intention is only to serve Krishna. So if someone is very determined and dedicated to serving Krishna, even the mind may have various wanderings, but that fixity in serving Krishna, that is pure devotion. And despite whatever conditioning may be there from previous lives or whatever, if one has this very strong determination to serve the Sankirtan movement, then very quickly all these disturbances will go away and one will actually fix in pure devotion. So in one sense there is no cause to lament this person. We lament that we are deprived of his association. We are sorry that the conditioned souls will not be getting so many books as they would have done if he was still here. But at the same time, you know, his life was glorious. From the time of taking up Krishna consciousness, he never deviated from Krishna consciousness. He was out in the battlefield. He was fully engaged in distributing books and pushing forward the book distribution. And in that situation, he left this particular body. So if a soldier dies on the battlefield, that is most glorious. So, as Prabhupada said about the passing of his own Guru Maharaj, there is nothing to be lamented. Balabhadra's mother and stepfather are also devotees. Stepfather means his mother she was divorced and then again remarried. His stepfather especially is very much promoting the activities of ISKCON in Ivanova. By Krishna's grace, he's earning lots of money and he's spending it for expanding the Sankirtan. That he's financing the activities of the temple. Mostly it's his the temple there is quite flourishing. So like I said, we'd like to dedicate this festival to him in his memory. I last saw him at another festival, the Rath festival in Baroda. So he distributed on that day, I think he personally distributed more than 300 books on the day. There are huge crowds coming out. So, he was the top distributor. Others were distributing 200, 150, he distributed 300. And then 2 days later in Surat, which is another city close to Baroda, we had an all-day festival actually, and he brought one devotee from Russia there. He brought him there from Hyderabad to get initiated. So he got initiated and he took him off to South India for book distribution. So at that time we were discussing where he could go for book distribution. And I was discussing maybe he'd go to Bangalore. That's a very good city for book distribution. So actually he went there and he'd reported to the devotees in Hyderabad that he's very happy there. It's a very good response they're getting. So he was in a very happy and confident mood. And then suddenly, Krishna took him. But yes, Krishna took him. So we're not disappointed. We know that Krishna is looking. Krishna has some plan for him. That we don't understand exactly. We shall understand in due course of time. So it's also, when anyone passes away, it's also time for us to reflect also. Smaran nityam nityatvam guru parya ahoratra. That we should always remember that everything in this world is temporary, and therefore we should perform devotional service day and night. Having got this human form of life, we should properly utilize it. Dadva sudolava midam bahusam bhavante manusham ardadam nityam apiha dhiraha turnam yatejana patet anuvritta yavan visriyasaya vishya khalu sarvatasya. Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna explains that having attained this human form of life, which is very rare to attain, it comes after many, many births, we should properly utilize it. It's very much temporary, it won't last long, but it is also very valuable. Because this human form of life can be utilized to understand Krishna. This Prahlad Maharaj also explained. Tomara acharyat gil dharman bhagavatamiha durabham manusham janma tadapya dhruvam artadam. He says that from the very beginning of life, someone who is actually very thoughtful and intelligent should engage in Krishna consciousness. Prahlad Maharaj said that even though this human form of life is temporary, it is very, very valuable because in this life we can cultivate Krishna consciousness. So Krishna says the same thing, that we should consider sometime this body is going to drop down there. So Krishna says as long as it hasn't dropped, as long as you're able to utilize this human form of life, utilize it for developing Krishna consciousness. You may think, well, there are so many other things I could do. What about sense enjoyment? Why don't I enjoy my senses? But Krishna says that we've already enjoyed that in so many lifetimes. Sense gratification is available in every species. We've already enjoyed eating, sleeping, mating and defending 8,400,000 species of life. Now we should, having got this human form of life, we should use it to become Krishna conscious. Because we never know when we will have to leave this body. Just like, you see, no one expected Balabhadra, he would go away so soon. He was making plans, and I was also, the future, where they would go, how they would develop the Sankirtan. I was also thinking about this future, but Krishna had another plan. So we have to surrender to Krishna's plan. Of course, as long as we're living in this world, we should not live irresponsibly. We should make some kind of arrangement for how we're going to live in future. Just like if you have to travel somewhere to preach, you should arrange to buy the ticket and like this. Or if you, for instance, if you decide that you're going to get married, then you should arrange for some house and some income and so many things. So we should make plans, but at the same time we should understand that at any time Krishna can cut short that story. So we should live our lives in such a way that as if we were not to see another sunrise. We should live our lives in such a way, understanding that Krishna can take us anytime, so we should make it. So we'll finish this lecture there. Shri Balabhadra Bhattacarya Prabhu ki Jai. All glories to His.